Captain Jake Morrison looked out at the stars through the bridge window of his ship, the New Horizon. The year was 2847, and he had been exploring space for 20 years. His ship was not built for war. It was made for discovery, for meeting new friends among the stars, and for learning about the universe. Jake was 38 years old, with brown hair that was starting to show gray at the edges. He had kind eyes and a gentle smile that made people feel safe around him. Like most humans of his time, he had never seen real war. The last big fight on Earth had ended over 800 years ago, in 2041. Since then, humans had focused on building, exploring, and living in peace. His crew was small but skilled. Dr. Lisa Park was the ship's expert on alien life. She was a thin woman with black hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She loved studying new creatures and plants they found on different worlds. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Blake was in charge of the ship's defense systems, though they had never been used for fighting. He was a tall man with red hair who spent most of his time reading old books about ancient wars. Chief Engineer Amy Torres kept the ship running smoothly. She was a short woman with dark skin and clever hands that could fix anything. The New Horizon had been mapping the outer edge of human space for 3 years. They had found 12 new planets that could support human life. Some had beautiful forests, others had vast oceans, and a few had mountains that touched the clouds. Each discovery filled the crew with joy and wonder. Back on Earth and the human colonies, life was good. People worked in jobs they loved, raised families, and pursued their dreams. The planet New Eden was humanity's greatest achievement outside of Earth. 50 million people lived there in clean cities surrounded by green parks and farms. Dan Cooper was one of New Eden's farmers. He grew food that fed thousands of people. Every morning, he walked through his fields with his wife Sarah and their 2 children, Ben and Katie. They laughed together as they worked, enjoying the simple pleasure of growing things that helped. Others. Helen Wright taught children at New Eden's largest school. She loved watching young minds discover new ideas about science, art, and the universe. Her students came from many different backgrounds, but they all shared the same curiosity about the world around them. Mayor Peter Kane ran the city government of New Eden's capital. He was a fair man who listened to everyone's problems and tried to help solve them. The biggest issues he faced were things like where to build new parks or how to make traffic flow better. Crime was almost unknown, and the few police officers spent most of their time helping lost tourists or rescuing cats from trees. The humans had weapons, but they were old and kept in museums. Most people had never seen a real gun. The military existed, but it was more like a rescue service. They helped people during natural disasters and explored dangerous places that regular citizens could not visit safely. When the first alien ship appeared near New Eden, the humans were excited. They had met a few other alien species before, and all of them had become friends. The aliens usually wanted to trade goods, share knowledge, or just talk about their different cultures. The alien ship was huge and dark. It looked like a giant metal beast with sharp edges and glowing red lights. The ship was 5 times larger, and the biggest human vessel, and its design was clearly meant to frighten anyone who saw it. Captain Morrison received the message about the aliens while his ship was exploring a distant star system. The message came from Claire Watson, Earth's top diplomat. She was a smart woman with gray hair who had successfully negotiated peace treaties with 6 different alien species. "Jake, we have visitors," Claire said through the communication system. "They call themselves the Korthax Empire. They want to meet with our leaders." Jake felt excited. New aliens make new opportunities to learn and grow. "That's wonderful news, Claire. What are they like?" "They're impressive," Claire replied carefully. "Very large, very advanced. They seem to have a powerful military, but they say they come in peace. The Korthax delegation arrived at New Eden 3 days later. Their leader was War Commander Zethrak, a creature that stood 8 feet tall. His skin was covered in natural armor that looked like dark green metal. His hands ended in sharp claws, and his yellow eyes seemed to look right through anyone he met. He moved with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. Behind Zethrak came 12 other Korthax warriors. They all wore the same dark armor and carried weapons that hummed with energy. Their faces showed no emotion, and they spoke only when their commander gave them permission. Claire Watson met them at the spaceport with a team of human diplomats. She wore her best dress and brought flowers as a gift, following human tradition when meeting new friends. The humans smiled warmly and offered their hands in greeting. The Korthax looked at the humans with what seemed like confusion. Zethrak accepted the flowers, but held them like they might explode. He had expected the humans to bow down in fear, as every other species had done when first meeting the Korthax Empire. "Welcome to New Eden," Claire said cheerfully. "We're so happy to meet you. We've prepared a feast in your honor and arranged tours of our city. We hope this is the beginning of a long friendship between our peoples." Zethrak's yellow eyes narrowed. In his mind, he was already calculating how many ships it would take to conquer this world. The humans seemed so weak, so trusting. They had no idea what they were dealing with. The Korthax Empire had conquered 47 different species over the past 1,000 years. Each time, the pattern was the same. They would arrive, demonstrate their superior military power, and demand surrender. Most species gave up without a fight. Those that resisted were crushed quickly and completely. But these humans were different. They did not seem afraid. They acted like the Korthax were friends who had come to visit for tea and conversation. Over the next few days, the humans showed the Korthax their technology, their art, and their way of life. They took them to hospitals where doctors healed people with advanced medicine. They visited schools where children learned about the stars. They toured farms where machines and careful planning produced enough food to feed millions. The humans offered to share all of this knowledge freely. They wanted to trade, to learn about Korthax culture, and to work together to make the galaxy a better place for everyone. Zethrak watched all of this with growing contempt. The humans were not just weak, they were fools. They had advanced technology, but no weapons. They had resources, but no armies to protect them. They had built a perfect civilization for someone else to take. That night, as the humans slept peacefully in their beds, Zethrak sent a message to the Korthax fleet waiting in deep space. The message was simple: begin the invasion. This will be easier than we thought. The attack came at dawn on the outer colony of Haven Station. Maria Garcia was making breakfast for her 3 children when the sky turned red with fire. The Korthax ships appeared like dark clouds, blocking out the morning sun. Their weapons lit up the peaceful farming settlement with deadly light. Maria grabbed her youngest daughter and ran toward the emergency shelter. All around her, neighbors were doing the same thing. Nobody understood what was happening. Haven Station had no enemies. They grew food and raised families. They had never hurt anyone. The Korthax soldiers landed in the town square. They were massive creatures in black armor, moving through the streets like hunters. They captured anyone they could find and destroyed buildings that had taken years to build. The colonists had no weapons to fight back. They could only run and hide. 300 light years away, Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the emergency message reached his ship. Dr. Lisa Park ran onto the bridge with tears in her eyes. Her hands shook as she showed him the images coming from Haven Station. "Jake, you need to see this," she said. "The Korthax are attacking our colonies. They're not here for peace." They never were. The pictures were horrible. Burning buildings, people running in terror, and Korvax soldiers treating human prisoners like animals. Jake had never seen anything like it in his 38 years of life. His peaceful world had suddenly turned into a nightmare. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Blake stared at the images with a strange look on his face. Something was changing in his eyes, something that had been sleeping for a long time. He walked to his computer and began pulling up files that hadn't been opened in decades. "Jake," Ryan said quietly, "I think we need to call Earth." On Earth, President Maria Santos was in a meeting about new schools when her aide burst through the door. The young man's face was white with shock. He whispered something in her ear that made her stand up so fast her chair fell over. "Cancel all my meetings," she told her staff. "Call an emergency session of the Global Council. Do it now." Within hours, leaders from across human space were connected by video link. The images from Haven Station played on screens in government buildings, on 50 different worlds. Leaders who had spent their entire careers talking about peace and cooperation now faced something none of them had ever dealt with. How many ships do we have that can fight? President Santos asked. General Kate Murphy, the head of Earth's small defense force, looked uncomfortable. "We have exploration ships, rescue vessels, and cargo haulers. None of them were built for war. Our military is designed for disaster relief and search and rescue." "Then we need to change that," Santos said. Fast, the message went out across human space that same day. For the first time in 800 years, humanity was calling its people to war. The response surprised everyone, including the humans themselves. Tony Rodriguez had been fixing air recyclers on a space station near Earth. When he heard the news, something woke up inside him. He walked to the military recruitment office and signed up to fight. He couldn't explain why, but he knew he had to do something. Beth Collins was a nurse on New Eden. She had spent her life healing people and making them feel better. When she saw what the Korvax were doing to human families, she volunteered for military medical service. Her gentle hands would now work to save soldiers instead of sick children. Dr. Alex Chon had been researching new ways to grow food in space. When the war started, he looked at his peaceful inventions with new eyes. The same technology that could feed people could also power weapons. He began redesigning his work for a different purpose. All across human territory, people were making the same choice. Factory workers, teachers, artists, and scientists were joining the military. They had lived their whole lives in peace, but now they were ready to fight for the right to keep living that way. The transformation was fastest among those who had studied the old ways. Ryan Blake wasn't the only person who had read about ancient wars as a hobby. History teachers, museum workers, and military scholars suddenly found themselves valuable in ways they had never imagined. Back on Haven Station, the survivors were learning what the Korvax Empire really meant. The aliens didn't just want to conquer human worlds. They wanted to break the human spirit. They made the colonists work as slaves and punished anyone who showed defiance. But even in the darkest moments, something unexpected was happening. The humans weren't breaking the way the Korvax expected. Dan Cooper, who had been captured while protecting his family, began organizing the other prisoners. He used hand signals and whispered messages to coordinate resistance. Sarah Cooper, his wife, had escaped with their children to the hills outside town. She was a farmer, not a soldier, but she began watching the Korvax patrols and learning their patterns. Other survivors joined her, and they started planning ways to help their captured friends. War Commander Zethrak watched these developments with growing frustration. In every other conquest, the defeated species would give up hope within days. They would accept their new place as slaves and stop fighting. But these humans kept trying to resist. His subordinates brought him reports that confused him even more. Human ships were beginning to appear at the edges of their territory. Not military vessels, but converted merchant ships and exploration craft. They weren't running away like other species did. They were coming toward the fighting. Commander, one of his officers said, the humans are mobilizing their entire fleet. Every ship they have is moving toward our positions. Zethric didn't understand. Are they surrendering? Bringing us tribute? No, sir. Intelligence suggests they're preparing to fight. The Korthax commander laughed. It was a cold, harsh sound. Let them come. We've crushed species with real militaries. These peaceful farmers and scientists will be destroyed in minutes. But on his private communication channel, Zethric sent a message to the main Korthax fleet. Send reinforcements to Haven Station. The humans are responding more aggressively than expected. He didn't want to admit it, even to himself, but something about the human reaction worried him. Every other species had begged for mercy or tried to negotiate. The humans weren't doing either. They were getting angry. Captain Morrison's ship was now leading a group of 12 converted vessels toward Haven Station. His crew had changed along with their ship. Dr. Lisa Park was using her knowledge of biology to study Korthax weaknesses. Chief Engineer Amy Torres was installing weapons on ships that had never carried them before. Most surprisingly, Lieutenant Commander Ryan Blake had become a different person. The quiet man who read history books was now coordinating battle plans. With the intensity of someone who had been born for war, he studied the Korthax attack patterns and began developing counters that no human had ever needed to think about before. Jake, he said one evening, I think we're about to discover something about ourselves that we forgot was there. What do you mean? Morrison asked. Blake looked at the star maps showing human territory. We chose peace because we were strong. Enough to choose it. But we never forgot how to be strong in other ways. The Korthax just reminded us. The first human counterattack was 3 days away, and both sides were about to learn something new about the species that had chosen peace. For 800 years. The first human ships arrived at Haven Station exactly 72 hours after the attack began. War Commander Zethric watched them approach on his battle screens and felt confident. The human vessels looked strange, like cargo ships that someone had tried to turn into warships. They moved slowly and awkwardly through space. 12 ships, his tactical officer reported. Mixed classes, no standard military formations. They appear to be civilian vessels with weapons attached. Zethric smiled. With his sharp teeth, send 8 battle cruisers to destroy them. This will be over quickly. But Captain Jake Morrison had not come to fight the way the Korthax expected. His ship, the New Horizon, hung back while the other converted vessels spread out in a pattern. That looked random. The Korthax ships moved forward in their traditional attack formation, the same one they had used to conquer 47 other worlds. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Blake watched the enemy ships approach. In the past 3 days, he had read every military text in the human archives. He had studied battles from Earth's ancient history and learned from commanders who had been dead for centuries. Now all that knowledge was coming together in his mind. Jake, tell the fleet to execute Pattern 7, Ryan said calmly. Pattern 7? Morrison had never heard that term before. Trust me. The human ships suddenly changed direction. Instead of meeting the Korthax head-on, they scattered like seeds in the wind. But it wasn't random. Each ship moved to a specific position that put the Korthax fleet in the center of a growing circle. The Korthax commander in charge of the attack group felt confused. The humans were supposed to charge forward and die bravely. Instead, they were, running in all directions. But something about their movement bothered him. Then the human ships stopped running and turned to face inward. All at once, they opened fire. The Korthax had never experienced anything like it. Instead of fighting one enemy at a time, they found themselves surrounded by 12 different attackers, firing from 12 different directions. Their shields, designed to block attacks from the front, couldn't protect them from weapons hitting them from all sides. 2 Korthax ships exploded in the first 30 seconds. The others tried to turn and fight, but every time they focused on one human ship, the others would hit them from behind or from the sides. Dr. Lisa Park was monitoring the battle from her position on the new horizon. She had spent the past 3 days studying Korthax biology and armor design. Jake, their armor is weakest at the joints between sections. If we hit them there, we can do much more damage. Tell the fleet, Morrison ordered. The human ships adjusted their aim. Instead of firing at the strongest parts of the Korthax vessels, they targeted the weak spots that Dr. Park had identified. It was like a surgeon using a scalpel instead of a hammer. Within 10 minutes, 6 of the 8 Korthax ships were destroyed. The other 2 retreated back to the main fleet, their crews shocked and frightened. War Commander Zithric stared at his screens in disbelief. His ships had been destroyed by converted cargo vessels operated by a species that claimed to be peaceful. It was impossible, but it had happened. How? He demanded. His tactical officer studied the battle recordings. Sir, they fought like they knew exactly what we were going to do. Every move we made, they had already planned for it. On the surface of Haven Station, the captured humans had felt the battle in the sky. The Korthax guards had become nervous and distracted. Dan Cooper saw his chance. He had been watching the guards for 3 days, learning their habits. He knew which ones were cruel and which ones were just following orders. He knew when they changed shifts and where they kept their weapons. The explosions lit up the sky above them. Dan gave the signal. The human prisoners had been preparing for this moment. Using tools they had hidden and plans they had whispered to each other, they began their escape. Sarah Cooper had been waiting in the hills with the other free colonists. They had been watching the prison camp through binoculars, counting guards and timing patrols. When they saw the signal from her husband, she led the attack. The Korthax guards had never dealt with enemies who knew the local area perfectly. Sarah and her team moved through the forest like ghosts, appearing from hiding spots the aliens didn't know existed. They used hunting rifles and farming tools turned into weapons. The battle on the ground was different from the fight in space, but the result was the same. The humans fought with a combination of desperation and intelligence that the Korthax couldn't match. They rescued most of the prisoners and disappeared back into the wilderness before reinforcements could arrive. The news of the victory at Haven Station spread across human space faster than light could travel. President Maria Santos received the report while meeting with military leaders who were still trying to figure out how to build an army from scratch. They won? She asked, not quite believing it. General Kate Murphy read the report again. Not just won. They completely destroyed a Korthax attack force with converted civilian ships. And the colonists freed themselves. Across human territory, the mood began to change. People who had been scared were now feeling something different. Hope mixed with anger, and underneath it all, a growing sense of their own power. Tony Rodriguez had finished basic military training in record time. The drill instructors were amazed at how quickly he learned to use weapons and tactics. It was as if the knowledge had been sleeping in his mind, waiting for the right moment to wake up. Palins was treating wounded soldiers from the first battle. As she worked, she listened to their stories. They talked about fighting with an instinct they hadn't known they possessed. They described making tactical decisions that felt natural, even though they had never been trained for combat. Dr. Alex Sean had finished converting his agricultural research into weapons technology. His new energy systems could power ship guns, twice as powerful as anything humans had built before. He was already working on improvements that would make them even more deadly. But the most significant change was happening in the military command structure. Officers like Admiral Blake, who had been promoted after the Haven Station victory, were developing new strategies at an incredible pace. They seemed to understand warfare on a level that surprised even themselves. The Korthax Empire was beginning to realize that something had gone wrong with their invasion. Intelligence reports from their agents described a human population that was transforming before their eyes. The peaceful farmers and scientists were becoming something else, something dangerous. War Commander Zethrak called for reinforcements from the home fleet. He told his superiors that the human resistance was stronger than expected, but he didn't tell them how much the defeat at Haven Station had shaken his confidence in his private moments. Zethrak wondered if his species had made a terrible mistake. Every other conquered race had given up after the first defeat. The humans had responded by getting stronger and more organized, but the Korthax Empire had been built on conquest and domination. They couldn't stop now, even if they wanted to. The only choice was to send more ships and crush the human resistance before it could grow any larger. What Zethrak didn't know was that it was already too late. The humans had awakened something that had been sleeping for 800 years, and now that it was awake, it was very hungry for justice. 6 months after the first attack, Admiral Ryan Blake stood on the bridge of the Defender, humanity's first purpose-built warship. The vessel was nothing like the peaceful exploration ships humans had once used. It was sleek, fast, and deadly. Every system had been designed with one goal in mind: winning the war. The human fleet had grown to over 300 ships. Factory workers, who had once built farming equipment, now constructed weapons. Scientists who had studied peaceful things now focused on ways to defeat the Korthax. The entire human economy had shifted from exploration and growth to survival and victory. But Blake wasn't satisfied with just defending human worlds. The Korthax had made a mistake when they attacked innocent families. Now they were going to pay for that mistake. "Admiral," Captain Morrison said from his position at the tactical station, "our scouts report the Korthax home fleet is gathering at their main world. Intelligence suggests they're preparing for a final assault on Earth." Blake studied the star. Maps. The Korthax homeworld was heavily defended, surrounded by fortress stations and protected by their most powerful ships. It would be the hardest battle humans had ever fought. "How many ships do they have?" Blake asked. "Over 800 combat vessels, sir, plus orbital defense platforms and ground-based weapons." Any sane military commander would have looked at those numbers and decided to stay on the defensive. But Blake had learned something about his species over the past months. Humans didn't fight just to survive. When they were truly angry, they fought to win completely. "Signal the fleet," Blake ordered. "We're going to their homeworld." On Earth. President Santos received Blake's plan with a mixture of admiration and concern. The Admiral wanted to take the entire human fleet deep into enemy territory for one massive battle. If they won, the war would be over. If they lost, humanity would be defenseless. "It's a huge risk," General Murphy warned. "If we lose the fleet, Earth will be open to attack." Santos looked at the reports from the front lines. Human forces had won 17 major battles in the past 6 months. Each victory had been achieved against superior numbers through superior tactics and determination. Her people had shown they could do impossible things when they had to. "Give Admiral Blake whatever he needs," she decided. The preparation took 2 weeks. Ships that had been scattered across dozens of star systems came together to form the largest fleet in human history. Engineers worked day and night to outfit every vessel with the best weapons and defenses they could build. Now Dr. Lisa Park had become one of the war's most important figures. Her research into Korthax biology had led to weapons specifically designed to defeat their natural armor. She had also developed new medicines that could keep human soldiers fighting, even when badly wounded. Chief Engineer Amy Torres had designed the engines that powered the new warships. Her innovations allowed human vessels to move faster and turn more quickly than anything the Cortex had ever faced. She had turned her peaceful engineering skills into tools of war. As the human fleet prepared for departure, families across human space said goodbye to their loved ones. But these weren't the tearful farewells of a doomed cause. People were confident that their military would return victorious. The journey to the Cortex homeworld took 3 days. When the human fleet arrived, they found exactly what their intelligence had predicted. Hundreds of enemy ships waited in defensive formations around the planet. Massive space stations bristled with weapons. It looked impossible to defeat. War Commander Zethrak watched the human fleet approach and felt a mixture of fear and anticipation. This would be the final battle. Either his empire would crush the humans completely, or everything he had worked. FOR would be destroyed. How many ships do they have? He asked his tactical officer. 312 vessels, sir. Much smaller than our force. Zethrak nodded, but he no longer felt the easy confidence he had possessed at the beginning of the war. The humans had proven they could do more with fewer ships than should have been possible. Admiral Blake studied the enemy positions from his command chair. The Cortex had arranged their fleet in the same basic pattern they had used for 1,000 years. It was a strong formation that had defeated many enemies, but Blake had spent months learning how to break it. "Dr. Park," he said into his communicator, "are you ready with the new weapons?" "Yes, Admiral. The biodisruption torpedoes are loaded and targeted." "Chief Torres, how are the engines?" "Running at peak efficiency, sir. We can outrun anything they have." Blake looked around his bridge at the crew that had once explored peaceful worlds. Now they were about to fight the most important battle in human history. Begin the attack. The human fleet split into 6 groups, each one approaching the Cortex. Defenses from a different angle. The enemy tried to respond, but their ships were too slow and their commanders too predictable. The humans had studied every Cortex battle for months and knew exactly how they would react. The first phase of the battle lasted 4 hours. Human ships darted in and out of the enemy formations, striking at weak points and disappearing before the Cortex could respond effectively. The biodisruption torpedoes proved devastatingly effective, shutting down Cortex nervous systems and leaving their ships helpless. But the real shock came when the humans did something no other species had ever attempted. Instead of just defeating the Cortex fleet, they began landing troops on the homeworld itself. General Murphy led the ground assault personally. Her soldiers, many of whom had been farmers and teachers just months before, fought with a skill that amazed even their own commanders. They moved through Cortex cities like they had been born for urban warfare. The Cortex civilians had never seen their own world under attack. For 1,000 years, they had sent their fleets to conquer other worlds while living in safety. Now, enemy soldiers were fighting in their streets, and their mighty military couldn't stop them. War Commander Zethrak made his last stand in the Imperial Palace. He had expected to die in battle, but not like this. The humans had not just defeated his fleet, they had humiliated his entire species. When Admiral Blake entered the throne room, Zethrak was waiting with his sword drawn. The Cortex commander was still 8 feet tall and covered in natural armor, but he looked small and defeated. "Why?" Zethrak asked. "Your species claims to love peace. Why did you become so good at war?" Blake looked at the alien who had started the conflict by attacking innocent families. "We didn't become warriors because we loved fighting. We became warriors because we loved peace enough to fight for it." The surrender of the Cortex Empire sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Species that had been enslaved for generations found themselves free. The mighty conquerors who had seemed invincible were now prisoners. asking for mercy from the humans they had tried to destroy. But humanity surprised the galaxy once again. Instead of becoming the new conquerors, they offered something different. The Terran Federation would protect any world that wanted to join voluntarily. There would be no forced membership, no tribute payments, and no slave labor. Former Korthax territories were given the chance to govern themselves. The humans helped them build democratic governments and taught them how to defend their own worlds. It was something the galaxy had never seen before. Conquerors who chose to liberate instead of enslave. Years later, War Commander Zethrak would spend his time in prison thinking about Blake's words. He had attacked humanity because they seemed weak and peaceful. He had never considered that their peace might be a choice rather than a weakness. The humans had proven that the most dangerous enemies were often those who fought not because they loved war, but because they loved something else enough to go to war for it. The Korthax had awakened something that had been sleeping for 800 years, and in doing so, they had chosen the wrong species to test. The galaxy was now a safer place, protected by warriors who remembered that the purpose of strength was to defend the weak, not to prey upon them.